Hello and welcome to my shop. This video is about my experience accepting delivery and setting up my SCM 315ES sliding table saw. We'll start with delivery. I need liftgate service, and two shippers told me that this saw would not fit onto a liftgate with the pallet measuring 89 inches by 43 inches. It turns out it does if you ship with FedEx. So I bought this saw through WSI Machinery in Illinois, and they shipped through FedEx. And the pallet was just able to fit onto the liftgate, and the heroic driver was able to get it down to the ground with no problems. Now, because I don't have a forklift, I then had to get the saw off the pallet. And for that, I used short sections of 3/4 inch EMT. Moving the saw off Egyptian roller style onto a set of 4x4 rails, if you will, at which point I was able to get my pallet jack underneath the saw, lift it off the rails, and finally back down onto the ground. I'd highly recommend getting a pallet jack for moving the saw around. It's quite heavy, and with the amount of footprint that it consumes, you probably will have to fine-tune this position in your shop just a little bit. So setting up certainly took some time. There's a lot of parts of this saw. And there were three areas that gave me trouble. The first was the ripping table, as I'll call it. That steel table comes as a separate piece. The second was with the optional overarm dust guard and its hinge. And thirdly was with simply hooking up the electrical. I'll start with the table. My table isn't perfectly flat. It has a slight bow to it. So it took some finessing to find a good place where it fit on the saw such that it wouldn't hump up above the level of the cast iron. With the hinge knuckle, the female part of the hinge that the pins goes through needs to be drilled out in order for the pin to fit through there. And thirdly, with the electrical, the instructions for that section are awful. There's really no clear description of where to connect your power cord into the machine. So I had to poke around in the box and take things apart and eventually figure it out. Here we are in back of the saw inside the electrical cabinet. So this is a piece of 10 gauge cord that I supplied. And so it feeds through this port here, and your cord connects into the main cutoff switch here. And there's no way to access those connections like this. You need to take this switch out of the saw. There's be some pictures here. So you have to remove this little cover, remove 4 screws, take it out. So then your power is here. It goes up and down through the switch. And then here's 2 more 10 gauge leads feeding out into the saw. I installed a little zip tie here just to take some of the strain relief off of those connections. So over here is where I connected the ground coming from the wall. There wasn't a clear place to put it, and again, the instructions didn't tell me where to put it. So there are other grounding elements going on to this metal backplane. So I just put a sheet metal screw into one of these holes and smashed it down with a washer. A piece of advice I have when installing the overarm guard is to use a sawhorse on your pallet jack to support the load. When you're installing the guard, you're not going to have on the extension. You're just going to be working with this piece of C-shaped steel. But even still, this piece is quite heavy. It's an asymmetric load. It's heavier on that side. So it's quite difficult to align it precisely enough to get the 4 bolts into place. So by using your pallet jack and some sort of support, I use a sawhorse. You can safely and precisely position the piece to get those bolts into place. I'd recommend using some of these quick grip clamps in expansion mode for fine-tuning the parts of the saw that are heavy and need precise vertical adjustment. I used 2 of them to fine-tune the height of the fence, and I also used 2 of them to fine-tune where the ripping table hooks onto the cast iron, and then using the adjustable leg on the ripping table to control that part of it. But otherwise, the saw was quite easy to set up and amazingly accurate out of the box, so to speak. The straightness of the wagon with respect to the blade was dead on. The squareness of the outrigger miter fence, again, was dead on. The scale is within like 1/10 of a millimeter to how it cuts. Amazing stuff. The alignment of the scoring blade with respect to the main blade, dead on, as is the alignment of the riving knife with respect to the main blade. I expected to spend a whole day fine-tuning this stuff. I'm upgrading from a Grizzly slider, and while it was cheap, it certainly cost money in terms of the time spent fine-tuning those settings. Well, I hope this video was helpful to you. Let me know if you have any questions or comments. Thanks.